Okay.
Did you know that 4.5 million women left the workforce during the pandemic? And of those, nearly 2 million have yet to return. That is a huge loss of talent and leadership. In fact, according to Time magazine, women's progress in the United States workforce has been set back nearly 3 decades. As we begin right now to do what Time magazine is also calling the Great Reopening, the question on everybody's mind is the exodus over? Are we all going to bounce back and dive back in, or is there an even bigger upheaval yet to come? I'm Heidi Roberts, and here to explore this with me today is Pamela Gardner. Let me tell you about Pam. Pam has worked in the STEM industries, which is science, technology, engineering, and math for nearly 20 years. And she's done this through her company called Biotech Vendor Services. But in the last few years, she's focused specifically on empowering women in the STEM industries to step into leadership. She's led seminars and events all over the country. She's worked at every level of the industry and worked with and talked to and coached thousands, literally thousands of women. She was also honored to receive the Athena Pinnacle Award, which is for mentoring women in STEM. So Pam's a woman who has her finger on the pulse of what's really going on underneath the surface. And she has a rather unique perspective on what companies need to do today to stem the tide in STEM. So Pam, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for having this conversation with me.
I'm thrilled. It's critical. So what do you think? What's going to happen with women in STEM? Are they just going to bounce back to the way things were before COVID?
I mean, there's still a lot of issues to address, Heidi, and it really depends on how the women and the employers handle the situation. So it needs to be handled very carefully. There's kind of an artificial optimism that everything's going back to normal because, okay, everything's opening up. But there's a lot of anxiety for some employees about going back to the workplace. People aren't coming back as the same people. They have different priorities. Many women are still considering different career opportunities, cutting back on their work and still leaving the workforce. So it's a critical matter that we have to address carefully.
Well, take me back a little bit to what was like for women in STEM industries before the pandemic.
Actually, Heidi, we had started to make some progress, and we were heading in the right direction. Although there was still a lack of women in leadership, women were publishing papers at much less than men. Women had to work 3 to 5 times harder to get the same recognition, and in many cases, they weren't paid the same. So, although we were making progress, it was not great progress.
So there's still a big gap, and especially in leadership. There's not a lot of women running big pharma companies. I think there's one on the big pharma companies, and just not nearly the percentage of women as men. There just wasn't parity in the boardroom, in the top levels of the administration.
Absolutely.
So then came the pandemic, and what happened?
Well, what started to happen, and it was much worse for women, there was higher degrees of depression, of anxiety, of burnout, because they were handling all of the home duties, the childcare, the homeschooling, the housework, et cetera. They suffered. And that's why we saw this mass exodus. And the other thing that we saw was really a pandemic of silence. The women were not able to talk to, their HR director or their manager to tell them that they were really maxed out because of fear of being judged, or maybe it was going to impact, their employment. So they were suffering in silence. They were sharing it with me, with the women that I interviewed, and with their other confidence, but not with people in the workplace until it was too late and they actually left.
I even heard that the levels of addiction and mental health issues and depression were way higher for women as well. Is that true?
Yeah, it was definitely way higher for women across the board. Children, men, and women all experienced more of these types of things, but it was definitely higher for women.
Okay, so then here we are coming back into the reentry phase of things. We're going back
Mhm.
to work, and um, I imagine some women are just dying to get out of the house and get into a more structured life again. Don't you think that's the case for some?
Well, you know what? Definitely for some people, some of the extroverts and people like being are tired of the isolation. They want to go back to the workplace. But there's many people that are very happy working at home, and it's creating a lot of stress for them to actually go back to the physical office.
Right. Okay, so here we are, and what are companies doing, or what should they do to make this transition period successful?
And you know what? I really wanted to acknowledge the companies because they have been doing a lot. They've been doing a lot more around diversity and inclusion training, around training of managers on the level of communication that they're providing to their employees, the way they're doing performance reviews, flex time, and even mental health programs. And so I commend them on that. But there's still an essential missing piece, and that's working on the micro, the individual, the experience that the individual woman is having. And unfortunately, we still have an industry that has a bunch of miserable micros that's got to be addressed.
Well said, well put. So tell me what you would propose to do about that. I think this leads into your program very well. What is that?
Yeah, Heidi, I actually have a 60-day program, which I've used with other women and also use the tools myself on a regular basis. And it's called The Art of Women Thriving in STEM. And it's a four-phased approach to really address and bring back passion for women for their jobs, for their careers, and also address the burnout and overwhelm at the core
Wow,
so they can be more effective at work.
cool. So, but tell me, what does it look like? What kind of program is this? Is this in person? Is it a seminar? Tell me what the format of it is.
We're doing it virtually. So because I have a lot of clients in the East and West and in the middle, and it can even be international clients. So we do it on Zoom. We meet for an hour and we do the core trainings to teach all of the key tools to moving out of overwhelm
An
and
hour
burnout.
a week? You said you meet for an hour. Is it every week?
Yes, it's every week for an hour. And then we also have the women go into individual, what we call badass butterfly pods, in which they're with other women that are experiencing the same issues. And that's one of the greatest strengths of the program, is for these women to be able to uplift and support each other and recognize that they're not alone in the problem that they're having.
Got it. So, and this is all takes place over 60 days. Is that right?
Yeah, it takes place over 60 days, 2 hours a week is the commitment to the program.
So we have 2 hours a week on Zoom is what we're talking about.
Yes.
And if I'm a woman in STEM and I'm thinking about going into this, what would I expect to the experience to be like? What would the journey be?
Yeah, the journey is looking at the issues that are happening and what is the end transformation that we want to get to. And to get to that end transformation, we have to address the difficult emotions, the grief, the burnout, the negative loop, the judgment that's coming up, the anxiety, the lack of passion, and the lack of motivation. And we do that, and one of the most powerful tools that we use is actually addressing your emotions, because people tend to bypass that side and they go and do addictions, or they don't want to feel sad, they don't want to feel angry. But when you actually feel those emotions, it's actually one of the most powerful components of the healing process.
When you allow yourself to feel the emotions and name them, and then um, I know from knowing you that you've got a whole toolkit of ways to work through that, to not get stuck in those feelings, but actually come out and be able to get back in touch with your dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the most important thing is you're not just working on the day-to-day task and surviving and just getting from one thing to the next. We're looking at what brings you joy. What is the passions that you have for your career, and to keep women advancing, because right now when they're in a state of overwhelm, the last thing they want to do is get promoted. And so we're going back. We've already set ourselves back decades from what happened during the pandemic, and we've got to move forward, not backwards.
I agree. That sounds fantastic. So,
Thank you.
have you ever experienced yourself what the women in your program may be experiencing right now? Have you ever been burned out or paralyzed?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was definitely burnt out, in 2017, but more recently, um, COVID hit me really, really hard. In January and February, I felt like I was on top of the world. I had gone to the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, and expanded access in DC. I'd met Fauci. Also, went to Boston, went to a conference in Naples, and then finished it off with a wonderful trip to New Zealand with 6 of my friends. And then I came home and everything just crashed. My events all canceled. I do on-site events and I couldn't find a virtual model. And there was many days it was difficult for me to get out of bed. I had anger, I had depression, I had fear, but I knew that I had to surrender and do the work. I needed to face my emotions, face what was happening. And if I wanted to be able to be the best teacher possible, I needed to use the tools on myself and really have an understanding of what those women were going through. And I think that's why I went through my own journey.
It's kind of a silver lining in the whole process, and you were able to be where you are today. I mean, you're now committed to, what was the vision you have for this whole project?
Well, it's interesting because I describe it as I had to go back into my cocoon. In January, February, as a badass butterfly, deeply had to go back into the cocoon, do the work, and then in June, started finding solutions and getting the confidence back, and came back to being a badass butterfly. But really, I have a program which helps women that are still stuck. They're spinning. They need to help themselves reframe and recognize there is a solution. They don't have to stay in that state of overwhelm, and they can have passion for life again. And that's what I help them with. And it's my passion. And I want to impact the lives of at least 10,000 women in STEM, so we can start moving the needle forward at a much more exponential rate.
I love that. I love that. So, closing shot, parting shot in the time that we have left, if you could say one thing to companies in biotech, pharma, any of the STEM companies, what would you say?
Let's not be complacent. Let's not have this artificial optimism that things are going to be exactly as they were before. We've got to address the core issues that employees, especially women, are still experiencing. And for the individuals, there is hope. You can have your passion. You've got to have your passion. You've got to have fun. You've got to enjoy what you're doing, and have life balance. That's so important, because you not having life balance leads to anxiety, burnout, and then disease. And none of us want that. So we got to keep our employees mentally, physically healthy, and there are solutions. And whether it's my program or somebody else's program, please, companies, take the action. Individuals, take the action. Know that there's a solution.
Okay, sounds great, Pam.
Mhm.
Tell me this. How would we reach you if we're interested in exploring this further and bringing you in to work with our company or to work with you directly?
You know what I'll do is when I post this video, I will put a place where somebody can set up an exploratory call with me, so I can fully address the issues that the employee or employer are experiencing and come up with a solution that can potentially work for them, and see if the program's a good fit for them.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for doing this super important work. I salute you. And I hope that the people and the companies out there will definitely take advantage of this. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Heidi.